Yes.
Everybody, welcome back. This is the third iteration of a political mantra. And in this episode, we are going to be going through mantras seven, eight, and nine. Of course, in the first one, we did one, two, three. And the second one, we did four, five, and six. And there's been a little bit of a gap. There have been some changes since our last episode, one of which being I'm in Idaho with Rob. Okay. Moved away from Louisville, and I'm now a potato man.
Mm.
And the other big one clearly is we are four. We used to be three, and now we are four. And so, as I'm sure you already know who Rob is and who myself is, let's go ahead and reintroduce Ryan, who's been with us with the first two episodes of A Political Mantra. Ryan, how are you?
Oh,
Who are you? Let us know.
I'm living the dream. Slowly figuring out who I am more and more each day. And I'm Dr. Ryan O'Keefe. I practice therapy under the supervision of Dr. Jacob Ambrose down here in San Diego. And I'm a lover of humanity and the world, and especially surfing. So yeah, that's who I am. And I
Excellent. And
believe wholeheartedly in Rob and his authorship, and I'm really
thank
grateful
you.
to be here
Thank you.
and friends with each and every one of you. You guys are all cherished people in my life.
And we already know how to reach Rob via his Substack and also his YouTube channel with descriptions that are going to be in the or links in the description below. Ryan, do you also have any links or
Yeah.
any way we can contact you?
Yeah, so I'll be putting those links, or we'll be sending them to you, and you can put them in the description. But it's pretty much across the board, Dr. Ryan O'Keefe, at just about all the fun little apps wherever you find your stuff, whether that's Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Coming out with a website soon. So yeah, you can reach me there if you would like to talk about anything or get some clinical help or even career development, life sort of coaching help.
Excellent. Excellent. And our fourth guest, we have a new guest. Janae, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you all for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I think having these conversations can be fun, right? And I think it is fun. And it is, I think, just the crux of being human, right? Is picking each other's brains, bringing our thoughts to the table. And of course, we can chew on things that we maybe don't agree with. I have a background in sociology, so my heart will always be with people, and I'm always fascinated by how we show up in life, really. Sociology is essentially the study of life in humans and society as a whole. I think everyone should take a 101 class. I'm born and raised in Seattle, but have been in San Diego, so big adventure, really big traveler as well. I've been really lucky to travel most of the world and expose myself to cultures, different ways of thinking. And yeah, I'm just excited to be here, have a conversation, agree, maybe disagree in a healthy way. And I think my ultimate hope is that people can just have more conversations like this. And it doesn't have to be, um, it doesn't have to derail your life. It doesn't have to derail your day, right? It can just be a fun thing that I can chew on later and I can choose what I take and what I don't. So I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Amen. Excellent. So it's been a minute since our last post, our last recording. So just as a refresher for everybody, we're going to read through the 15 political mantras. And then of course there's going to be an emphasis and a larger breakdown in this episode on the mantras seven, eight, and nine. So Rob, if you could please start with one through three, and then we'll just go around and read the rest of them.
Yeah. So read the beginning here as well. The purpose of these statements is to create a mindfulness in engaging around controversial topics and to assert what we all hold in common in spite of our differences. And I recognize that people can argue immediately off these points, but I believe we can come to understanding through them. So number one is we all believe in the meaning, significance, and purpose of each individual and of life in general, regardless of purpose-driven claims to the contrary. But life is difficult, including knowing what is right, and anyone who says differently is selling something. Therefore, your doctrine or orthodoxy better include and emphasize understanding and forgiveness, because
We are all fallible, both individually and collectively. Freedom of speech is the practical implementation of acknowledging our fallibility. Denying freedom of speech is asserting infallibility. We can all know this, and our hope lies in this because humans can understand each other and very often do, even across vast differences, including cultural differences.
Our destiny is together. Therefore, if someone doesn't want to reach the other side, you shouldn't be listening to them. And at the same time, you can't read minds, and people aren't perfect. And resilience and strength are more valuable than fragility.
Hmm. Yep, and now I'm reading. We all want to be heard, addressed, and counted. So we should be active listening when we can and steel manning when we can't, because the winner of the debate may still be wrong. Getting closer to truth over a longer time is better than producing gotcha moments for short-term wins.
We all believe in fairness and justice, though not to the exclusion of all inequality. We all want to go beyond politics and believe in the value of life beyond politics. We all believe there is hope for and value in anyone, and we also all believe there is a limit to usury that will be tolerated. And I will say that I appreciate everybody helping out in the reading. This is something I wrote, and it doesn't, because it came out of their mouths doesn't necessarily mean they agree or support it. And so we're going to get into that on points 7, 8, and 9 coming up now. We have any other introductory remarks? Or
I think we're ready to roll. We'll go ahead and
Get it?
reemphasize this is a work of Robert Davis's here, and
Mm.
it is available on his Substack.
Mhm.
And so there will be a link in the description below for that, for you to access that, plus a bunch of other works that he has as well that we've gone through on this channel, some that we have not. So if you're interested in that, please feel free and peruse.
Uh, so also on this post, we've read through the synopsis, the points by themselves. And as you go past that, each point is broken down and has several paragraphs of discussion on it in the writing portion to attempt to start that discussion. So we're going to hopefully expand on that here, touch on some similar points probably, but talk about what people who haven't read the discussion, what their thoughts are and whatnot. So this 7, 8, and I'm really happy that we have another guest on for, and it starts to get a little bit potentially more contentious, and so I'm interested to see how it goes and how we can apply the methods, hopefully, or I'm going to try to apply what I think is the method, and you guys are going to bring what you have to the conflict resolution to the extent that there might be conflict, and apply it as we go through. Point number one for today, number 7, is our ultimate destiny is together. And in the discussion, I talk a little bit about the idea of a will to power and how in the modern world, I think that we can have the idea that, well, wars and conquering is something of the past, and we are more enlightened and more peaceful. And so we don't really have a will to power. But my contention is that we don't experience a will to power so much because it seems like the world is sort of set already, like borders are set. We have a semi-stable global environment, global society, whatever you want to call it. And so we look at conquest as something foreign and something breaking that. But my contention is that we have to be aware that even though we don't experience it as much right now, as humans, we have this drive to incorporate, to unite, even if that uniting is by coercion, by force. And so whether we're going down a peaceful path of uniting or a conquest path of uniting, I think we are all aiming towards unification. So if we recognize that, I think that can start us having things in common and knowing, well, we actually are trying inherently to connect, to build a bridge, or at least we should be.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we all are humans, right? We're maybe born some places. Some people are born with a better situation or a more challenging situation. I think just out of all my years of travel, I've realized that each society has different sets of values, right? And we might value money and independence more here in the States versus in Asia, honor and respect and really karma, right? What you do is what you get back. That is a higher value. But I think at the end of the day, at least in my experience, I think we all want the same things. I think we want peace, security, a home, right? That can look differently, really a roof over your head, whatever that might look like, and food, right? And connection. And I think the way we go about that, right, and wars and borders can really shadow it over and really confuse it from like who we are just at our core. But I think we all do want the same things. They just might be in different orders.
Yeah.
Right. And I think when I read that our ultimate destiny is together, that's what I'm reminded of. Um,
Yeah. And just
yeah.
like yeah, it's interesting because it's like and right now a huge topic and debate is like and at least in America is like ICE and like strengthening borders and things like that. And I'm reminded like a big buzzword in the therapy realm right now is healthy boundaries. And and I just heard a funny like comedian make a song about just like you're not giving me healthy boundaries. You're being a dick. Like you're actually being just like rude and annoying. But it's like so it's sometimes it can come across that way, or even like you can try your best to like, oh no, this is a boundary so that we can actually have a more sustained relationship moving forward. But it comes across in like a mean sort of way. And whether that's like having like property lines and being like, in order for us to live in this like little community that we got here, like please don't just like be throwing trash on my side. Like respect my my property. I'll respect yours. We'll have this sort of like arrangement. And it might look like me like we used to have this neighbor that would always like yell at us because we'd jump over his fence to get balls when we'd play baseball and stuff like that. Luckily, I wasn't in the South at that time and he didn't have firearms. But both of those could actually be like we were like, oh, that's a monster. But in reality,
Yeah.
like he's trying to live his version of like unification and ultimate destiny was through that aggressive old man curmudgeon. Um, but uh, but ultimately, like it was to have us all learn how to respect each other and live more harmoniously together. So it's interesting how like yeah, people even when they're like attacking, whether that's like countries or like neighbors or whatever else it can be, at least how I'm understanding this is like they're all to try and get us to live more harmoniously together.
I wouldn't say all.
Yeah, maybe not all, but
Right. And
um,
I mean, you could just look at what's going on with Gaza, right? And
Hmm.
that's clearly, I think a lot of us in our core feel like there's something off about it, no matter how you feel about it, right? And in its core, something's off. But I do agree with you that I think in general, we all, yeah, your neighbor just wants his peace and he likes his solitude,
Hmm.
right? I don't think the intentions are always that way and a bigger scope. Um, again, the keywords, it's not everyone applies, right? And I think at the end of the day, a lot of us do want the same things, and it just may come out in different ways. But I mean, the whole topic of war and borders is like a whole nother conversation. That is,
So let me, if I may, let me propose a couple of things here because what sticks out to me is under what framework are we labeling togetherness off of?
hmm,
Is a corporation's idea of what togetherness means? Is this a government's idea? Like, are we all together because we each have our own digital ID? We are all following the same religion. We're all following the same set of principles. See, when I think of our ultimate destiny being together, it's understanding a level of connection within each individual, respecting, like what Ryan is saying, respecting that person's individuality, but realizing that there's more in common than there is in separation.
Mhm.
There's more of a desire to keep people separated, right? Because it's easier to control. If there's an overarching hierarchy of some sort, it's easier to control that population if they instill an identification of differences in that population. There's an analogy of if you put a bunch of red ants and a bunch of black ants into a jar, they will typically live in harmony. But then if an external hand comes in and starts to shake the jar, the red and the black ants will start fighting, completely oblivious to the fact that the reason why they're fighting was an external hand that shook that jar, right? And so the analogy is there because I think that there wouldn't necessarily be any wars. I mean, that's kind of a far stretch, okay? But I think that wars would be few and far between if people were just able to exist, because I think we have a natural tendency to observe similarities,
Mhm.
not necessarily in the fact that we need to become the Borg, right? And we all have this overarching hive mind and we don't have a sense of individual identity, but we just naturally gravitate towards wanting to express peace. It's only through media, and especially now with social media and this desire of instant communication, where some incident can happen in Bangladesh or in some other obscure. I'm not saying that Bangladesh is obscure by anybody by any means if anyone's watching from Bangladesh, but some other part of the world, and all of a sudden see now we have to be involved, even though typically if we weren't paying attention to the media, we would just be going to work, spending time with our families, saying hi to our neighbors, mowing our lawns, whatever the case may be. But now we're saturated with content to where we have to have an opinion on everything,
Mhm.
and everything is so incredibly divisive. And so rather than, let's say, looking at the people that are causing the problems, we are finding differences within everyday people across the street, saying, "Oh, you disagree with me on this opinion. Now I can't talk with you. Oh, you're pro-vax. Oh, you're anti-vax. Oh, you're pro-Gaza, or you're pro-Israel, or you're left, or you're right, whatever the case may be." Rather than thinking, "Okay, that's my neighbor Jim across the street. He's got a beautiful lawn, a beautiful family, and he does a great cookout, and I love him for it."
Hmm.
Mhm.
And so and the last point I'll make is this. See, togetherness is this as well. See, we can go out and choose. We want to eat pho. We want to have Mexican food. We want to have, Indian food, Ethiopian food. And see, each cuisine is unique, but everybody has access to it. It's not that we're all eating the same thing. Everybody takes pride in their culture and what it is that they're producing, and it's okay to express that, and for everybody from other cultures to enjoy a piece of that in
Mhm.
peace and in harmony.
Mhm.
And that's my idea of togetherness.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that analogy. Yeah, it's a great one.
So I I agree with some of the stuff in there, but the main point of us being naturally peace loving, I just don't think is right.
Mhm.
I think that, I mean, from a religious level, we can have that faith and we could say, mm, you know, if you believe in a religion that allows you to believe that, you could say, Christianity, you could say man was made in the image of God and was not made to war with each other. And whoever sheds man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, that sort of thing. But in the world that we live in, the fallen world from the religious point of view, um, war is not something that is just instantiated by malevolent forces that want us to be at war. Like war existed before there were any global governments or anything approaching that. So I think it's more complicated than that, unfortunately. But I think recognizing the complication is necessary. And the what was I going to say? The I lost it. Anyhow, I think it's we have to recognize the impulse that we have to conflict and on the scales that brings up to.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and I think that you like get into that at least with number nine of the resilience and strength piece there being more valuable than fragility. Like, and yeah, this other man, I've been watching a lot of social media, I think. This other like term of like it's a skill issue is one of our friends says. But the skill part of how we come together, like there's like and it's not so black and white that you could say like wars, like what you're saying. It's always like that's the lowest skill available, but generally violence in a lot of senses isn't typically that's like last case resort
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
able to come together is violence.
Mm.
And yeah, when Rob and I were working in wilderness rehab settings, like we had to be trained to be physically capable of restraining people that were gonna harm other people or harm themselves. And just like in these like situations where you just have people that that's their only go-to to resolve conflict, like oh man, like it, yeah, it becomes much more. You have to be able to like apply skill to be able to keep things peaceful and to come together at the end of the day. And how well you're able to do that is the skill of everyone in that group. And that could be a broader metaphor for like nations and everything else as well.
Mm.
Yeah, does that make sense? We could,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, these points I don't think we're going to be able to go through one at a time like we have the last ones because they're all immediately bleeding together here.
yeah,
One of the things I talk about in there is um, like in order to have a safe space, you have to have borders and border security. You can't have a safe space unless you can protect that space and kick people out who are not respecting the safe space rules. So like that's already part of what we've touched on. And um, this idea of our ultimate destiny being together is in here in the place of where um, like what Ryan was saying, I think you were talking about people's intentions. Like the ultimate basic intention is generally positive. I mean, you can get to the all is a all is all, and that's difficult. Um, but there are people who are currently acting in an unskillful way, let's say, and are more on the lines of prepping for conflict or moving towards conflict. And the point of the point in the mantra, our ultimate destiny is together, is to confront those instances where people are participating in that and say, okay, hold on a second. Yes, it looks like there are all these reasons why you've gotten to where you are and why you're engaging in the actions you are, and we can understand those. But let's take a step back for a second and remember we do actually ultimately want to end up together. And so how are we relating to each other? And do we have that end in mind, or are we focused on the proximate end of like, oh, we just need to fight? Well, what is the point of the fight? Isn't the point of the fight to pursue justice and a better union? Um, and from we talked about the art of war, but there's a point I believe it's in the art of war, where he says we should regard ourselves as like brothers who will be reunified, not enemies forever, or something like that.
Mm.
mm,
Yeah, and I think what
mm.
you're really talking about is how we're more similar than we are different, right? And I've always loved this statement, and I think, sure, it can be a little cheesy, but going back to, the different cuisines, right? We might come from very different backgrounds, but we both like Ethiopian food, and it can just be that, right? You can be from your own walk of life, and I can too, but actually, we're both humans. You have a sister, right? You have a mother. I have a mother at like the end of the day, right? And I think, naturally from a sociological side, our brains want to, and probably psychologically too, go good, bad, safe, danger, right? So naturally, our brains actually want to divide, and we have to be careful with that. And even when you approach someone that's new and maybe completely disagrees with you, a lot of people have the flight, reaction. They just don't even want to deal with it.
Right.
And I remember this mentor of mine, I'll always stick with me, is that your first reaction is always going to be what you were raised with or whatever it may be, your belief. But in between your first reaction and your second reaction, there's a pause. And in that pause, there's choice. And even if I like deeply disagree with you on something that might be just really personal to me, but you have no idea, I can be triggered by it. Like, that's okay. And I get to like take a breath and then realize, like, okay, I don't think you're trying to change my mind. I think you're just trying to share your perspective. And I can be open to it. Doesn't mean I have to change my mind about how I feel, because it might come with a lot of context. But I think between that first reaction and your second, I think that's where the space is, where a lot of people tend to, jump. Um, and that's your body's natural reaction, but we almost have to lean into the discomfort a little bit and remember that we're more similar than we are different, even though we might have different paths or different beliefs. And it's actually healthy too. And it's
Mhm.
super healthy. And like from I'm forgetting what they're called, people that study organizations and companies. What is it? I was telling you about Adam Grant.
Well, industrial
Industrial
psychologist, big
psychologist,
one.
right?
Yeah.
And some of the best businesses in the world are very diverse backgrounds where they actually don't believe in a lot of the same things. And that's for a
Mhm.
reason, right? It's actually good to have dialogue and it's good to not agree upon everything. But the main thing is that we are together in
Mhm.
it. I think we all want, again, the same thing. So
Yeah.
that's the last thing I'll say about that point.
Did you say Adam Grant?
Yeah, Adam Grant.
Yeah. How to Change Your Mind is, or was
Um,
think
that's
again.
yeah, think again. Here's a few others. Yeah,
Good
he's
book.
incredible. If you guys haven't checked him out,
Yeah.
really awesome.
So I'd agree with that point, and I want to bring it back because if we are in an understanding that people for the most part have a tendency to, let's say, look at similarities rather than differences.
Well, and I don't agree with that.
Okay, well, I'm getting into that right now.
Okay.
Ooh.
A lot of that is with coercion. Okay, a lot of that is with energetically charged coercion. So if there's an enemy at the gate, that if you let this enemy in, you have to get on the defense and you have to then take care of that enemy.
Mm.
Okay. But at my point, from what I've noticed, in my opinion, throughout history, regardless if we're looking at globalists, we're looking at a centralized entity that has to convince a population to act a certain way. And it's typically for resource allocation. We don't have enough of this. We need to get enough of this. We have to get what they have. And in order for me to convince the population to go in and get what we need for our population, we have to deem them as the bad guy. Well, they're wearing gray shirts, and we know that people who wear gray shirts eat babies. And so, we don't
Theaters.
want to be baby eaters, right? So we got to go and kill them. Otherwise, they're going to eat your babies.
Mm.
But ultimately, we need their corn. That's why. But I can't get my population to go and kill these people simply because we need their corn. We have to paint them a certain way.
Yeah.
And so it pits people against each other.
Mhm.
Now, if we're looking at a broader situation, okay, of scarcity mindset, if we're in an idea of scarcity mindset, then there's conflict, right? But if you're on your farm, you're tilling your land, you're dealing you're self-sufficient. You don't have to go and attack somebody to get what they have. It's simply due by the idea that people are easily susceptible to the opinions of quote unquote experts and what they believe. Well, that guy's wearing a shiny coat and he said a certain thing. And so he's a believable guy. So I'm just going to believe what he says rather than think for myself, rather than think, well, wait a minute. It takes a lot of force and energy and effort to go to war for something. And my point is this. See, every time we have a big war, the cream of the crop of our potential for our society is capped off because it's always the strongest men that go to war. Okay, and I'm not saying this to be sexist. I'm saying this in terms of wars were typically fought by men, and so the men at the front lines were typically the men with the highest levels of testosterone, probably the highest levels of reproductive abilities, and they were always the ones that died, right? And so every time we have one of these conflicts, our potential gets diluted, diluted, diluted. And so war is at great cost. I don't think personally that it is inherent within us to fight for the sake of fighting. It's typically because the population is convinced to go and attack something because they believe that the other group is the enemy. And so they're willing to sacrifice their strongest men in order to protect the women and the children and the civilization that they have. But then at the same time, most people don't realize that that's the cost, right? Most people don't think about it in terms of, on both sides, you're destroying the highest level of your potential, and then what's left? I mean, of course, great achievements have resulted in war, in terms of scientific advancements and whatnot. A lot of them have been to the detriment of society, but nonetheless, it's typically at great cost.
Mhm.
And I think that if war is of a necessity, it should be because there are frothing barbarians at the gates, and there's no other reason to move forward because if you don't, then you're gonna die. You're dead. That's it.
Yeah.
Mm.
And Rob, you were mentioning this idea of like like the ultimate part, or I think at least I perceived you making a connection and an importance on that ultimate part, like holding space for like there, like it's this final goal,
Yeah.
it's this pinnacle of like, oh yeah, we've made it, but in like reality, we have like a lot of constraints. And like there are some times where like in order to get there, you need to work through conflict.
Yeah.
A lot of times, like I'll just like speak from my personal experience. I've been like a people pleaser and quite conflict avoidant. But that's actually been a detriment to getting closer with folks. So like just acknowledging sometimes like there is conflict and we do need to ruffle feathers and hold. I think the more that we can like or that I've been able to like realize like okay, I have a problem here. If I could have had a magic wand in the past, I would have just been like, I wish I didn't have a problem with this and I could just go along with whatever the family wants to do or my friend group wants to do or partner, whatever it is, community. But sometimes like, no, I do have a problem with this. So we do need to engage in a conflict right now, but I do have this like with as with as much as I can, given the restraints of or constraints of like time, resources, energy, um, how can I solve this to be able to move toward a togetherness for like everyone around me? And like building up I think like yeah, just like making more and more space for conscientious, skillful conflict resolution can be a really helpful thing. And because conflict is so important for living harmoniously together. And it's not necessarily, I don't know how realistic it is without some serious miracles happening that we'd see this in our lifetime.
Yeah.
Um, and honestly, like, luckily, we don't need that. I don't believe we don't need to have reached that destination to experience the fruits of experiencing better and better togetherness and like what you were saying about the fruits of not necessarily being in conflict, but the fruits of just like what happens when we are all the working together and it's like the sum is greater than the or how do you say that? Like
I
the
think
Some
yeah.
of the
yeah, sounds worth something.
Working together is we get something better than us just individually working ourselves out. And I'm reminded about this in terms of like the Army Navy game that just happened. And there's this quote, both my parents, and I do have to say like that was more of a historical example, Stephen, about the women or the men going off to war and not necessarily women, because I came from a mom and dad that both went into the army and both served and did all that stuff. And yet, like, so on the for the Army Navy game, they say, upon the fields of friendly strife, conflict, are sown the seeds that upon other fields on other days bear the fruits of victory. Other
Mm.
fields, it can mean like war and combat, but like the worst of the worst, but also like uh, if we just normalize and learn how to like be better and better sports and better sportsmen on like a football field or like in our families and all these other things, then we can actually work through a victorious resolution at the end of the day. I love what you said there about the art of war being like ultimately we are fighting, but we actually all lose if we totally obliterate the enemy and all their resources. like we want to like try and work towards like actually keeping our enemies' resources full as much as possible, with still achieving victory so that we can all share in the fruits of the eventual resolution and peace from either interpersonal conflict or international conflict, I'd say.
Mm.
Yeah. I think a lot of this what we're talking about really reveals and circles back around to point two, life is difficult, including knowing what is right. And I always want to re-highlight that in these discussions and be a little bit of a Debbie Downer, because while we can say hopeful things and we can do it, like, you know, people get raped, like terrible things happen in the world, things that really justice cannot be done. And there are things that happen at this point. I think there are things that happen that are worth fighting for, that are worth going to war for, are worth killing people for. As terrible as that sounds, I don't think it's a defensible position to sit down in a circle and say, well, if we all just talk like this, and then we're all happy and it's all good and it's all going to be great and we can work together. Like, there is that hope, and there is that message, and the goal of this is to give people hope, and hopefully a bit of a model what we can provide. But I don't want to straw man the darkness of the world, the difficulty, the reality of conflicts. And anytime we think, oh, well, conflict just comes from this particular thing, and if we did this one thing, we could fix it. I'm immediately like, no, we would have fixed it already if it was this one thing. It's sort of this interminable problem, and it goes, from the levels of war all the way down to talking and having conversations. And that's what point 8 is about. If someone doesn't want to reach the other side, you shouldn't be listening to them. At the same time, you can't read minds, and people aren't perfect. And
Hmm.
that's one where really, it's just not good enough in itself. I'll say that as a single point. You got to get into the discussion a little bit. But can I use an example,
Sure,
Stephen?
absolutely.
So if we just think about this for a second, of like, what does it mean to talk with someone? What does it mean to have a dialogue, especially as a person who, like, if you, well, whoever you are really, but if you don't think of yourself as like totally informed and you've got all the, T's crossed, everything nailed down, what does it mean to be in the act of figuring things out and putting stuff out there? So, like, Stephen talked about the history of warfare and men being killed off and testosterone levels. And I'm sure, hopefully we get a bunch of views. I'm sure there are a bunch of people will be like, oh my gosh, he believes in eugenics. Like, based on just one thing someone says, people's minds can go all sorts of ways that the person didn't intend. You know, you headed it off and you were like, well, I'm not trying to be sexist, but Ryan's like, hey, my mom's in the military. But there's so many added layers of just, I say the words that I intend and the meaning's just perfectly easy and everybody's understands what I mean, versus and then the layer of the person receiving it, like Ryan's like, hey, by the way, here's my thought and let's move on, versus being like, excuse me, sir, you said this and that's unacceptable because,
Yeah.
and
Or just
and wow,
leading the conversation, like what you're saying. Like,
sorry, I missed the
you
first part.
if you're just saying you shouldn't be listening to them, like as soon as I heard that, be like, oh, okay, then nope, I disagree. Or like I have a different view. Like you must not be capable of seeing any additional information or something.
Right, right. And I do say in the discussion of this statement of you shouldn't be listening to the person who's not trying to reach the other side. This is a statement about habits and tendencies over a long period of time, not about individual moments. And people need to vent it sometimes. Sometimes people are just saying something and they don't really believe it. And having that space and saying, being able to sit with someone and sit through that. And even if they say things where you're like, wow, I don't like that, to whatever degree, I don't like that. There's, you know, well, then what's the solution? If you just say, oh, you said unacceptable things, canceled, blocked, let's not have any more interaction. Well, now there's someone out there who you have conflict with that's not resolved. That's adding to the conflict of the world. And then, as I said, these are all circling around because that ties into the idea that we need resiliency and strength. We need to be resilient to hearing things that we disagree with. We need to be resilient to having the discussions, giving feedback when appropriate, or as best we can when we decide, make a judgment that it's appropriate. So these are all really just like mashed and tied together. And it's very difficult and uncomfortable. It's not all just like sunshine and rainbows, and we'll just all hash it out and have it solved in a month or
Mhm.
Right.
a single podcast or whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm really glad that you expanded further upon that, right? Because I think just like if you say it, trigger word for me, I immediately want to shut down, right? Versus when I initially read this, and I even told you this live when I read it, right? All I saw was side. And I think I'm like, well, that's good, that's bad. Well, what's a good side, right? But really, what I was missing out on is the word reach and reaching someone emotionally is I think what you're really talking about. It's okay if I disagree with what you might be saying, but if I'm not even willing just to like hold space for whatever your perspective is, then I shouldn't be sitting there, right? I shouldn't be listening to them. I don't think what you're saying is just because Ryan says something I don't agree with, I shouldn't have conversation with them. It's actually the opposite of what you're saying.
Yeah.
But if I'm not willing, or maybe I'm just not in the space to
Mm,
really go into it, and like that's
mm,
okay.
Yeah.
yeah.
But I think it's important that we say that. It's like, hey, I like don't agree with you and I don't have space for this right now. But, and this takes courage, which to me is strength, right? I hear strength, I hear courage, right? Um, but I think it's important that we go back to that conversation because it's really easy to let one of you two are talking about letting the conflict, it's there now, right? It might be a riff, right? But I think it takes courage and strength to re-engage in that conversation. Um, but I think the key word for me here is reach. And when I think of reaching, I think of stepping in someone's shoes just for a second. Doesn't mean I have to believe it, but just for a moment, can I maybe see where they're coming from, even if I disagree, right? Because there's validity in most, I shouldn't say most, but like your perspective has validity to it, right?
Yeah.
There's truth in it, right? Whatever it is, maybe I really, really disagree on it. And there's some things that I may not change my mind on, right? And I know that. But we have to be tolerant, I think. And resilience, I think I think of tolerant as
Yeah.
well.
And I love the point that you just made of like I'm reminded of the fluidity that like we all as just individuals will live in a state of being that is resilient and like strong, but then also like we all have fragile moments, and maybe that's
Mm,
just not the right time. W One person that really helped my life a whole lot, like talked about when you're having like conflict, make sure to follow tone, turf, and timing. Have the
mm,
conversation in a safe place where you both can feel like resilient and not fragile. Tone, like how are you using your tone during it? And then, yeah, timing. Is it when they are in a place psychologically where they are able to be resilient and open and to these discussions? And just like us individually, like sometimes, like at the end of a long shift, like I do not want to debate freaking anything with someone. If someone came at me super hard with something, I like I might instantly want to just like stop listening to them or whatever else. But that's also okay in that moment to be like, well, hold on. I got to do some of my own stuff over here, and I got to work on myself to be able to be resilient enough to like have these discussions and to ultimately work together. I might need to like do some self-care and whatever else, and that's okay, and that's normal, and that's healthy.
mhm. Hmm. And I think that goes into you can't read people's minds, right? And people aren't perfect.
Yeah.
I'm curious, kind of your context with that. But I was even taught through just some personal development. It's almost good most of the time to actually ask permission. Like, hey, can we talk about this? And I think we do this sometimes in our relationships, not always, even though we should. It's not easy, right? What we're talking about goes beyond just humans, and I think a lot of conflict happens in personal relationships maybe more so than daily life, but asking permission, like, hey, like this triggered me. Can we talk about it? And that person has the opportunity most of the time they might say yeah, but sometimes they're like, just not right now, or Ryan just got off a 12-hour shift. Like, can we talk about this tomorrow? It's like, it's okay. And myself, that I want to resolve the
Yeah.
conflict right away. And some of us are either or, right? It's like, I just want to talk about it now. I have to learn to adapt to that, right? But that doesn't mean that the topic is off the table. We get to come back to it. But I think asking permission is what's missing sometimes in these topics that can be, polarizing.
Mhm.
I would like to bring up, okay, so this may be going down a rabbit hole, and please pull me back, pull me back out if,
Go,
because
Alice.
this is an analogy here, okay? So we're dealing with potential adversity, somebody who's not listening to our, or somebody that's not open to discussion, okay? But we're living in a world that's extremely transparent now, okay? Uh, Anybody could post anything on social media at any point, and you get instant communication. And as a result of this, it's becoming very clear that across party lines, doesn't matter if you're red, if you're blue, it doesn't matter. It's becoming very apparent that there are individuals in high places that are extremely compromised, potentially kitty diddlers, and it's coming out, and there are people that don't want this information out, and there's people that are still defending them, like, well, no, not my party, not my guys, but yes, your guys and the other guys, everybody's guys are a part of this. And see, to me, that's something worth fighting for.
Mm.
Okay, that's not an enemy at the gate trying to break in. That's somebody in charge that doesn't need to be in charge anymore. Okay, that is, I don't even want to. Okay, so what do we do? I mean, and I'm just saying this open. Is this something that we twiddle our thumbs about and continue to go to work and say, okay, kumbaya, hey everybody. I'm actually going to be pissed off at my neighbor because he's got a Biden flag, or I'm going to be pissed off at this neighbor here because he's wearing a red MAGA hat, instead of the fact that, well, both of them are compromised.
Mm.
I mean, what's then the restructuring? Because see, that takes a level of unity. That takes a level of unity on the base level to enact some sort of a structured cohesion, a group effort to get something like that out and
Mm.
to bring virtue, integrity, and morality back into a position of power. But
Mm.
we've been so satiated, and we've been so desensitized and used to these conveniences that it's like, well, as long as my gas is under $4, as long as I still got TikTok, as long as I still got A, B, and C and D, then everything's fine. I don't care if they're doing the most insane bullshit you could possibly imagine. It's okay as long as I don't see it, right? It's okay. We keep getting these hints like, oh, we have these folders of the Epstein files. We're gonna push those down the line. Actually, you know what? They don't even exist. It doesn't even matter anymore. Move on, move along. Actually, we're gonna start this war over here. We're gonna do this over here so that you're not even thinking about it anymore. You
Mm.
know, what is that level of cohesion? Because to me, I'm at a point now to where if people are defending individuals like this, I can't even I can't listen to it anymore. And it
Mm.
doesn't matter if it's right or left. See, people think like, oh, well, you're bashing Trump. Well, you must be a liberal. You're on my team or you're against my team. It's like, no, I'll bash the liberals just as much as I bash the conservatives. Because if you're in this two-party duality, thinking that one is better than the other in these instances, you're completely brainwashed a part of the problem.
Mm.
And we've been programmed. See, we think, and I'll end on this note. We think that because something has happened in the past, that it doesn't exist anymore. Goebbels was the propaganda master, and because there's no more Goebbels, there's no more propaganda. But we get propaganda every single day. Every time we turn on the TV, it's the same shit over and over and over, and we keep getting told lies until we believe it is fact. And then eventually we're just parroting what people say. Oh, it's safe and effective. Oh, yes, this is right. Oh, yeah, this is wrong. Blah, 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 blah. And we can't even agree on anything anymore because we don't even have our own opinions. We
Mm.
just listen to what Sean Hannity says and said what he says. We listen to what Rachel Maddow says and we just spout off what she says. So I think a huge aspect of this is taking back a level of individual sovereignty. Like, what do you really think? And actually, not only what what do you think? But can you also mold the opposite point of view in your mind and think like, wait a minute, I can picture why this guy has that opinion. I don't agree with it, but I can see I can formulate the argument in my mind, but I don't agree with it. Rather than just, oh, that guy's full of crap, he's wrong, I'm not even gonna give him the light. Actually, he's worse than filth. He's not even a human being. He's, ABC. How do we get to a level of being inoculated to other points of views without losing our individual sovereignty?
Mm, mm. Yeah, I think something that pointed out what you just said is he's just grabbing a charger. It's restructuring how we think about it, right? Because if I believe that this side is always good, but then something clearly morally wrong has happened, that requires me to reprocess it and to really rewire my brain towards it and really relabel it. And I think we're in this day and age where we love to label everything, like freaking everything. It's crazy, right? But when certain things appear, that forces me to change what I believe, my label about this person, that party, that party. I think some people are like, well, I just don't want to see it. Like, I don't want to go there. Right. And that's kind of what you're talking, or at least what I'm hearing you say. And it takes adaptability to do that and willing to be wrong and to disagree. Because that's a great example where it's not just about Democrats or Republicans, both sides are in the wrong because it's morally wrong, right? We can talk about morals a whole nother session, I'm sure, especially philosophy majors. But I think there's certain things where I agree with you. We have to get back to our individual mindset, not individual mindset, sorry, just our own thought process and our own beliefs, and just taking a step back and be like, actually, this what's happening is just wrong, and I don't agree with it. It doesn't have to do with either side. And what are we willing to stand for? Um, and it takes a level of courage to do that too. And I think a lot of people steer away from being wrong and really changing your mind about things. And I think we should lean into changing our minds more, especially when new information's presented, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And seeing the thing that that comes to my mind is like how when like how difficult it is to realize that you're actually being fragile. Like there's a lot of people that feel so strong. They're like, no, I'm a warrior, whether it's like I'm ready to go to war for the right or I'm ready to go to war for the left. Like they call it militant liberalism or like militant conservatism, like on both sides. Like, and yet like I at least often see like there's fragility behind both of those like points of view, oftentimes, at least in my experience. And so, but it's so funny because like in their head though, they're like, no, this is how strong I feel about it. But in reality, it's like, no, like, are you saying that like, and it's interesting, like one little mini metaphor is like when I'm like really exhausted and just like at my wit's end, not doing a lot of self-care, that's when I'm most like ready to like snap on someone. And yet like it'll be a strong snap. Like I'm capable of like becoming physically violent, given the right circumstances. But in reality, it's like, yo, is it worth getting in a fight surfing? Like that's actually the person that's ready to go to blows surfing is actually the most fragile person out there. And the other person that's like, you know what? Yeah, you cut me off. But hey, like my day's
It's the
like
ocean.
it's the ocean.
No,
I'm
that's it.
still doing pretty okay. Life's gonna go on. Maybe I'm gonna talk to that person later and like and try and figure out like how to correct this behavior. But yeah, so that's an interesting just like how much we can be blinded by our own fragility in certain states, and think that it's actually strength, but in reality, it's like nah.
Mm.
Yeah. Wow. So many things of interest there. Um, I'm really excited for hopefully more discussions because we're tying into later stuff too. Um, Janae asked at least one question I want to try to answer. Of you asked about the what I meant by under that we can't read minds and people aren't perfect. And we asked about where we go from here. So I want to try to hit on those. People can remind me of that. I also want to say about surfers. They are a wonderful point of how I think it is a fallacious view to view people as fundamentally peaceful because when surfers are on land, they're the chillest
Uh-huh.
people out there. when they are in the water, they will cut your throat. And I knew this guy who was like just the epitome of like pushover, laid back guy. He was a lacrosse coach, and it was bad for him because he was too soft. And but then like he told a story about how he almost strangled someone like in the water. And it's like, well, hey, guess what? When resources become limited, because there's a very finite amount of good surfing space, turns out people act differently when there's very clear limited resources to compete over. So anyhow, there's that point
Yeah.
for surfing.
I'd love to comment on that really quickly because I'm a big surfer as well. And the culture sucks. I'm like, it could be the coolest thing ever, and it's just not. And I think people that don't surf, they think it's so cool, and everyone's, and it's kind of, and it can be. And there's a huge group
Yes.
that are rad and that are inclusive, but there's a good handful that are what we call salty. They're just so salty and so mad. And it's, the ocean's so funny. If you go to Hawaii, they surf with aloha, and there's all these points where it's a lot of it's just respect, have
Mhm.
fun, and share the waves. Like it's the ocean. It's the one place actually no one owns. And it's one of the few places in the world where you don't have any devices, you don't have any outside things. But to your point, when the resources are limited or what you think in your head they're limited, actually there's plenty of ways for everyone. It's hilarious. You can have two different experiences. You can have a blast. And I remember someone always saying the best surfer out there is the person having the most fun. And it's
Mhm.
so true. But we forget that when we think when we're in this scarcity mindset that there's only so much to go around. So I need to claim, and I think that's the crux of a lot of conflict. And
Mhm.
you can even go back to land and to borders, and it's like, well, if you have that resource, I need that. And I come from a space where I love indigenous cultures. I'm from native land. I'm not native myself, but I'm from Mukilteo in Snohomish County, right? And that's a whole nother conversation, right? Instead of having just conversation like, hey, you have this resource in Catan, right? If anyone plays Catan or it's all about, you can trade or it can get really nasty. It can go either way. But I think, again, there's choice in how we approach things, and we need to actively choose how we show up. And again, your first reaction might be your old one, right? Might be the trigger, but that second reaction there is choice in it.
Mhm.
Mhm. And so then just briefly, you were asking about what I meant with we can't read minds and people aren't perfect. And that's just that space of, well, I heard them say this. Is that what they meant? You need to have that space to wait. Your first reaction, oh, they said this, instead of reacting on that, clarify. Is
Mhm.
that what you meant? Well, what about this scenario? Just being able to walk down that path, and then sort of on the flip side of being like, well, am I holding like an unfair standard of purity? Like let's say I listen to a particular podcaster all the time, and if I listened with, my opponent's ears, they would hear all sorts of things that are like red flags and like, well, this guy's saying things that are really unhealthy and really unhelpful. And I just sort of let them pass by because I'm like, okay, whatever. I like the things that I like, and I'm not taking the rest seriously. Like, whatever my attitude is, I hear that and that's fine. But then I hear this other person, and me calling out the little minutia of what they're saying. Is that fair? Am I actually pursuing justice? Am I pursuing help, or am I being dictatorial and nitpicky of a way that I wouldn't practice on myself and people who agree with me? And so there's those levels of people aren't perfect. Like, we're not all, we talked about this last time, we're not all able to be in therapist mode all the time. We can't, like you guys were saying, at the end of a long shift or whatever it is, we can't always be the person who handles everything perfectly and make sure everyone is heard and perfectly addressed, and we just can't get it perfect. We can't do it all ourselves, even though every single time that we don't, someone potentially gets hurt, and things move closer to disunion, to misunderstanding, to people feeling fed up. And then that ties into the resiliency of how do you stand the fact that we're imperfect and we can't fix the world on our own? How do we stand the fact that someone didn't hear me the way I wanted them to, and they have this view of me now, and maybe I never have a chance to fix that? All those things are imperfections that, if you just focus on them and you just meditate on that, well, any one of them can expand into ultimate conflict. Any one of them could spell sort of the disaster that we all fear, if we just let stuff like that compound. But we need this resiliency to be able to say, yes, there's imperfection. Yes, there's uncomfortability. There is a level of conflict, but we actually have the strength, the capacity to harbor that conflict, to get through it, and to hopefully address enough of it to keep us a lower simmer, and I think not deny the simmer. I don't think it'd be helpful and usually to deny the simmer, but instead of just letting it build and build and build and focusing on it, having a strength that allows us to bear those injustices, small scale injustices. Let's say if people misunderstanding you, mislabeling you, using words you don't agree with, whatever it is. So that's all encompassing of where I was trying to get with the sort of two sides of, you can't read minds. You don't know what someone's intentions are, even though sometimes you actually do have to assume intentions. And people aren't perfect and they need time to vent, and you're not always the person for them to vent. So it is this complicated morass, and it is difficult and whatnot. And then the question of what do we do about it? And this is, I mean, this is my attempt, or one of my attempts here. I've written a couple books that I'm trying to push in this direction. And one of those cores is hopefully reframing our mindsets of who we are. We are strong, resilient people. We have the ability to understand across difficulty. We have the ability to bear with and through injustice in the pursuit of a better union, whatever you would say, justice in the long run, not being overcome by the momentarily smaller injustices, you might say, and getting in fights about that, and then ultimately falling to worse injustice like war. Whereas if you bear things, potentially you can avoid the larger, excuse me, the larger injustices. So my hope is through this work to be pushing in that direction. We talked about The Art of War, which had a lot of fruitful discussion on that. We also mentioned some stuff from Aristotle's Politics that was super interesting and touched on these things. And it's helpful to know that people have been dealing with this for thousands of years and saying very similar stuff. And then the last thing I'll say is the single most beneficial spiritual practice I've found, and it applies in everything in life and all the way down to politics, is praying for your enemies. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that specifically is not just saying the words, but sometimes just say the words, and that's fine. Maybe that's all you have time for. But when you do have time, looking into your heart and saying, this person, whoever it is that bothers me, maybe they're not, I don't want to call them my enemy, but they're the annoying person on social media, whatever it is. Can you find a place within yourself where you actually want the good for that other person? The good for that other person might be that they figure out that you're right and they're wrong, and they come around to your side. The good for that person might be that you figure out that you're wrong and come to their side. Whatever the good and the truth is, can you actually believe that that is universal and that it's there, and you would be open and willing for goodness to enter that person's life? And if you could find that space in yourself, I mean, I'll just say you find God. Like that is my recommendation, is pray for your enemies.
And there's strength in that, right? Like someone who may not be religious, right? Where I was raised in a religious uh, household, but I have this thing with prayer, right? And the word prayer is always attached to most religions, right? But prayer is really meditation. It's intention. It's maybe not out loud, maybe just in your head.
Journaling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
journaling, but really wishing well on someone. And I think of strength in that way. And to me, it's almost taking the oh, I'm forgetting the phrase, like the higher, not the higher, but
The higher road.
yeah, the higher road. There we go. Yeah, just taking the higher road. It's like, wow, like actually, I don't agree with you, but I still wish you well. or even like I think some people maybe can relate when it's like a really bad breakup. You might be going through it, but typically, hopefully, you come to a point in time where it's like you actually just want well for that person, even though maybe it didn't end well or whatever it may be. So I think, there's certain words again where people might hear prayer. It's like, well, I'm not religious, so I wouldn't do that. But it's like, no, no, what you really mean is intending well and taking a step back. Um,
Hmm.
and to me, that's strength and really, yeah, courage again.
Get more resilient. It's so
Hmm.
good.
Hmm.
Right on.
Alrighty, everybody. I mean, this has been an incredible conversation. We're coming up here about an hour 20. Okay. I mean, this is and of course we can keep going for a long time.
Yeah.
But I think that let's go ahead and wrap it up for this conversation. And then whatever, we still have on our minds now, we can go into the next set, which would be what 10, 11, 12.
Hmm.
Okay, on the part four. So hopefully both of you can partake and join us with the next iteration as well, if you're open to that.
Yeah. And I
Um,
love 10 too. I don't want to spoil it, but
Oh,
hopefully
oh,
everyone's read it. But, it's like we all want to be heard, addressed, and counted. Like, yes, like that to me is togetherness. Like
yeah.
at the end of the day, we all want really those three things, no matter what background you come from. So, yeah,
hmm.
I'd love to join in. Then it goes into active listening
Yay.
too, which is definitely the keyword's active, right? It takes effort.
Not being consumed by your ability to come up with a counter argument or narrating something in your head, by actually being present and listening to what the other person is saying. And with that, hopefully comes empathy, which is actually what's quite needed this day and age. Okay, everybody. So we are here with Robert B. Davis the second. His books that we've gone through, we went through Purpose and Form, the necessary basis of all ethics. We are currently now going through the political mantra. You can order Purpose and Form on Amazon. I'll go ahead and leave a link in the description down below for that book, as well as a link for the Substack article, which is going to be available, as well as other works that he's composed. I myself, you can join the Sons of God Discord community. Link will be down in the description below, as well as a link to one-on-one coaching. Yes, dogs are going a little crazy out there. Uh, Ryan, you have several links as well that you will share with me via the email, and we'll go ahead and put those in the description. And Janae, thank you very much for coming. We'll go ahead and, of course, if you're interested, come on back for the fourth iteration of this,
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
of course. Um, Sorry about that. We have three incredible.
We had some conflict to deal with.
Oh,
Oh, they're going through it themselves.
They are. They are. And so, everybody, thank you for joining, and we will see you on the next episode. God bless, and may peace be with you.
aloha, mahalo. See you guys around. And we can